This is the story of a boy whose life was cursed from the moment he was born. His mother holds him close, a brief moment of peace in a world about to crumble. At that same moment, his father receives news that shatters their entire future. And so, the boy was born into a life of crushing, inescapable poverty. He was forced to eat whatever he could find, even weeds from the ground. But this endless misfortune, he would learn, was only just the beginning. The universe itself seemed to conspire against him in small, cruel ways. He's even accused of shoplifting for an item he never touched, because of course he is. A simple walk down the road ends in a violent, sudden impact. And so, his tragic life of endless misfortune came to an end at just 18. But his story doesn't end there. He awakens in a strange, white void. And he's not alone. A monstrous beast greets him with a hungry snarl. The boy, barefoot and confused, faces down a massive white tiger. The creature lunges, a streak of pure predatory power. He's thrown back, completely unprepared for the sheer force of the attack. Yet, he somehow counters, driving the beast's head into the ground. The impact sends a shockwave through his body, drawing blood. He looks at his hand, which now crackles with an unknown energy. The boy who only knew misfortune now wears a look of pure defiance. Apparently, dying does wonders for your self-confidence. He holds his ground, fist to fang, with the monstrous beast. For a moment, he wonders why he isn't running for his life. The tiger answers with a devastating roar that tears the world apart. His consciousness fades, a single thought echoing from a time long past. Suddenly, a sharp voice cuts through the void, demanding his attention. Our boy is back in a classroom, stammering a reply like he never left. The voice belongs to a girl with sharp teeth and an even sharper attitude. She lounges with her feet up, complaining about his lack of enthusiasm. Apparently, his performance was so bad it made her break her no-smoking pledge. He points out she looks a bit young to be smoking, which she takes very well. She leans back with a smug grin, making a rather bold declaration: she's a god. And with her divine power, she's offering him a second chance in a new world. As a bonus, he'll be granted 3 special skills, chosen completely at random. Our boy, however, seems less than thrilled by this supposed act of charity. The god stammers, admitting there might be a tiny little catch to the random part. He stands, demanding to know why all 3 of his new skills are complete duds. She casually changes the subject, struggling to even remember his name. He introduces himself with a chillingly calm smile: Mutu Kushina. The god complains that even his name, Kushina, sounds far too unlucky. Apparently, being called out by a dead teenager is bad for a god's composure. He explains that his unnerving smile is simply a side effect of his misfortune. The god is completely thrown off by his cheerful acceptance of a cursed life. She wonders if he's trying to summon good fortune or just be incredibly creepy. Trying to regain control, she decides to just explain the skills she gave him. Skills, she explains, are a form of magic that defy the world's common sense. She lists his 3 gifts: super regeneration, immortality, and indomitable spirit. Kushina listens patiently as she begins to detail the powers he randomly received. The first skill, super regeneration, is demonstrated on a deeply wounded arm. It allows for the instantaneous recovery of any injury, no matter how severe. But there's a catch. The regeneration has a limit, and exceeding it means death. She moves on to the second skill he's been granted: immortality. It's a simple power, really. He will just never grow old. Kushina listens, his expression a perfect mix of confusion and doubt. He raises a hand, pointing out that so far these skills don't sound so bad. The god assures him he'll see the catch soon enough, especially with the third skill. She introduces the final, most problematic power: indomitable spirit. Our boy just stares back, completely unimpressed by the dramatic name. He asks for an explanation, and the god seems to struggle for the right words. She decides to use a video game analogy to make it simple for him. Every living creature, she explains, has a kind of health or stamina bar. She explains that when this bar hits 0 from injury or sickness, you die. But at the very moment of death, indomitable spirit will activate. It revives you, but leaves you clinging to life with a single point of health. Kushina is understandably a little confused by this. He points out that this basically means he can't die, just remain in a near-death state. But she warns him that he must never, ever use this skill. She admits his other 2 skills are actually incredible on their own. Kushina just sits there, his face a blank slate of misfortune. The god takes a long drag from her cigarette, building the tension. Because, she reveals, there's one final terrible condition for it to work. The god reveals the final condition: he must have no fear of death. Kushina echoes her words, confused by the impossible requirement. She explains that fearing death is a fundamental instinct for survival. As a god, she's overseen countless reincarnations over the eons, and she declares that a human without a fear of death simply cannot exist. She looms over him, mocking his earlier assessment of the great skills. She scoffs at the very idea that this setup could be a good thing, because with these 3 skills, there is only one possible outcome. Kushina's expression says it all. His legendary bad luck is officially multidimensional. She delivers the final verdict: he will not survive in the new world. And with that final damning judgment, Kushina is sent on his way. He awakens not in a void, but lying in a vast, sunlit clearing. The god's words echo in his mind, a death sentence tied to his dud skills. He slowly sits up, taking in his new and supposedly final surroundings. Before him stretches a sprawling, primeval forest, vast and untamed. There's no doubt about it, this is the new world he was promised. And as far as the eye can see, there's nothing but an endless sea of trees. But instead of despair, he finds comfort in a familiar sight, plenty of weeds to eat. He soon discovers a stream, its clear water flowing over smooth stones. Despite the god's dire warning, Kushina feels a flicker of hope. Maybe he can survive this. A painful memory surfaces, a girl apologizing for something she couldn't give him. He tries to wash the thought away, splashing cool water on his face. For a brief moment, he lets the weight of his life crash down on him, but he forces it back, plastering on that familiar, unsettling smile. He knows that if he stops smiling, his luck will only get worse. With renewed focus, Kushina begins scouting the area for useful resources. His search quickly pays off as he spots some potentially edible mushrooms. Crouching down, he feels a genuine sense that things might just work out. He reflects that this solitude is better than the judging eyes of people. Unfortunately, the local wildlife's judgment is far more direct and immediate. A massive ape-like beast ambushes him with blinding speed. Kushina's world is literally turned upside down by the force of the blow. He's swatted away like an insect by a monstrous clawed hand. He hits the ground hard, the impact knocking the wind out of him. Stunned, he looks up to find his entire arm has been torn from his body. The horrifying reality of his injury begins to sink in. A wave of unimaginable pain washes over him as he screams. So much for his moment of hope. His luck is as terrible as ever. The creature lands beside him, its sheer size shaking the very ground. But instead of finishing him, the beast seems more curious about its new toy. But in the midst of his agony, something impossible happens. His arm explodes back into place, a testament to his super regeneration. The beast, unimpressed by the light show, slams its hand down again. Kushina is pinned, the air forced from his lungs by the crushing weight. Bones crack under the immense pressure as the monster bears down. It lifts its hand, perhaps expecting to find nothing but a red stain. But Kushina is still there, so the beast simply grabs him by the head. It holds him up like a trophy, roaring as it begins to squeeze. Kushina can only endure the agony, his vision starting to blur. The monster's grip tightens, determined to finally snuff out his life. The beast suddenly releases its grip, dropping Kushina from a great height. But instead of falling, Kushina latches onto the monster's back. He sinks his teeth into its flesh with desperate primal force. The god's final words echo in his mind. He was never meant to survive. He wonders if this is it, if this is how his second life ends. His body gives out, coughing up blood as his life fades away. The beast's jaws close around his head, ready to end it all. A sickening crunch echoes through the forest as his neck snaps. Turns out Divine Reality TV is a thing, and Kushina's the star. The god seems unsurprised, concluding that it was impossible for him from the start. She laments that he was meant to help her overcome some great trial. Kushina's final thoughts are of his skills, all utterly useless against this fate. The god watches on, her expression a mask of cold disappointment. He now understands that indomitable spirit was truly a meaningless gift, and with one final sickening snap, his world goes black once more. She crushes her cigarette, dismissing him as just another unlucky failure. Annoyed, she decides it's time to find another reincarnation candidate. But a sudden development on her screen stops her dead in her tracks. A blood-soaked fist punches its way out from inside the monster's throat. The god is left completely speechless, her divine composure utterly shattered. The beast chokes and gags, completely baffled by what's happening inside it. Its eyes roll back in its head, wide with a terror it has never known. An arm forces its way out, tearing through the monster's throat from the inside. Kushina's hand grips the beast's jaw, prying its mouth open with impossible strength. He emerges in a torrent of gore, screaming with a rage born from a lifetime of suffering. With a final, desperate heave, he pulls himself free as the monster stumbles back. The colossal beast collapses, its life extinguished in a pathetic, smoking heap. Kushina lies on its corpse, utterly spent but somehow impossibly alive. Back in her divine office, the god stares at her monitor, frozen in place. She can only stammer, utterly failing to comprehend how he survived a certain death. The god realizes his super regeneration must have activated just before death. She struggles to accept the possibility, her mind racing in disbelief. Then it hits her. He must have activated Indomitable Spirit. But that's impossible. No normal human could ever use that skill. Back in the forest, Kushina whispers a single agonizing question. He screams not in triumph, but in despair, asking why he was saved. The god can only stare, completely baffled by his reaction. Kushina collapses, reliving the nightmare of his reincarnation. He was given a set of supposedly useless recovery skills, and was promptly devoured by the local welcoming committee. He was so close to the end he'd always craved. He screams that he finally thought he was allowed to die. He rages at the universe, asking how long he must be forced to live. His desperate cries are directed at the god who sent him here. The god can only stammer that this boy is completely twisted. She realizes he somehow used the impossible skill to revive from death. The one who pulled off this miracle is a boy who despises his own life. Apparently, being a god doesn't mean you've seen it all. She's left wondering just what kind of creature she's unleashed on this world. And Kushina can only stare into the abyss, his own name echoing in his mind. He reflects on the cruel, unending joke that is his existence. He screams into the void, cursing the fate that always deals him the worst hand. He collapses, overwhelmed by the sheer unfairness of it all. He questions how long he must be forced to endure a life he never wanted. His desperate cries echo across dimensions, demanding an answer from the god herself. She can't believe it. He used a skill that should have been impossible. The system confirms it. Indomitable Spirit has been activated. And the one who performed this miracle is a boy who just wanted it all to end. A boy who despises life so much he's fallen into utter despair. The god can only call him what he is, a twisted, indomitable anomaly. He can only laugh at the cruel joke that is his existence. He screams into the forest, cursing his luck for always drawing the losing ticket. The god can only watch, completely stunned by his reaction. She can't believe he's calling his own miracle a losing ticket. The sheer absurdity of it all sends her into a fit of laughter. She turns away, wondering just what kind of being she's unleashed. And that man's name is Mutu Kushina, the Indomitable. Her curiosity piqued, the god returns to her desk, searching for answers. Turns out, divine HR doesn't always do its due diligence. And there it is, the resume from his previous miserable life. The god stares, her eyes wide as she finally reads his file. She's looking at the complete, unfiltered history of his life. A life defined by being beaten down again and again. The file replays the scene of his death in brutal detail. His consciousness fades, overwhelmed by unimaginable pain. He lay there bleeding out as the world offered empty platitudes. But the file shows this wasn't his first brush with tragedy. His parents argue, their own lives ruined by the same bad luck. And through it all, Kushina could only endure the agony. His life story reads like a frequent visitor card for the local hospital. The file shows a young Kushina, bandaged and broken in a hospital bed. A nurse peeks in, asking if the painkillers have finally kicked in. He quietly admits they haven't, the pain still a constant throbbing presence. She tells him they're out of medicine for kids, he'll just have to bear it. Kushina accepts this with the same quiet resignation. He accepts everything. As another child cries down the hall, the nurse tells him to get some rest. Suddenly, she announces his parents are here, and his eyes widen in surprise. From behind the curtain, his parents ask the nurse how their son is doing. They express their relief upon hearing that he's recovering smoothly. But when they finally enter, their smiles are anything but reassuring. They ask him how he's been, their smiles feeling hollow and rehearsed. Kushina forces a smile back, managing a weak affirmative response. The curtain is pulled aside, setting the stage for a grim family visit. His mother asks if the official report about his accident went through smoothly. Kushina can only look back, confused by her strange line of questioning. She sits by his bed, telling him the outcome should be obvious. Her gentle touch suddenly turns violent as she grabs him by the collar. She rips his gown open, asking if his injuries were blamed on the accident. He can only agree, his back a canvas of bruises and old scars. They express their relief not for his health, but that their story holds up. His mother explains the silver lining, a big payout from the driver who hit him. The file reveals this wasn't his first accident, but a practice scam. All his suffering was just a means to an end for them. They even forced him into shoplifting, using his age as a shield. Their reasoning was simple. They were poor, and he was their tool. As they leave, they offer some truly stellar parenting advice. Get hit by a fancier car next time. He came to understand that his parents saw his very birth as a curse. At first, they were just a poor family, offering comfort and apologies. But soon their desperation curdled into cruelty and abuse. The beatings became a routine, horrifying part of his childhood. He was taught to believe that he deserved every blow he received. The young boy was crushed by a guilt he should never have carried. He would dream of a life where his luck didn't make him a burden, but those dreams were shattered by the screaming reality of his existence. His father's words were a constant reminder. He was the source of all their pain. He eventually realized how wrong it was, but had no strength left to fight back. Instead, he was left to clean up the messes his father made. He would lie there for hours, alone in the wreckage of his home, curled into a ball, trying to make himself as small as possible. And then he would quietly clean, his spirit as broken as the glass on the floor. His small hand trembles, spilling water onto the floor. He once craved their praise, but learned obedience was just a way to avoid pain. He'd ask strangers online what they treasured most in the world. The answer was always the same: a child, loved just for being alive. The very concept was a foreign, painful idea to him. His mother would come home from work, tired and ready to lash out. She would straighten wire hangers to leave deeper welts on his back. His father would beat him for not laughing at a terrible joke. And so he practiced that unsettling smile, the only defense he could think of. He learned to navigate the wreckage of his father's drunken rampages. His mother would beat him with a searing hot frying pan. His father would tell him to die before smashing a bottle over his head. He was threatened with knives and then cut just to prove a point. His head was held under running water until he nearly drowned. Even when sick with a fever, he was kicked and told not to rest. The file lists endless brutal instances of him being beaten. He was screamed at until his ears rang with their hatred. He was held down and degraded in the most disgusting ways imaginable. He was kicked while on the ground, already broken and helpless. The abuse was a constant, brutal rhythm that defined his entire life. He was trampled on, treated like dirt under their feet. He was beaten for any reason or for no reason at all. He was choked until the world faded to black. The list of horrors was endless, a constant cycle of suffering, and through it all his eyes grew colder and emptier. Pain, he came to understand, was simply an unavoidable part of his life. So if he couldn't escape the agony, he would have to adapt. He decided that if he couldn't avoid it, he would simply feel nothing. It was a defense mechanism born from unimaginable trauma. He learned to disconnect, to turn the pain into a distant echo. He touches his own skin, testing the limits of his newfound numbness. He tells himself that if he feels nothing, then nothing can hurt him. He had finally learned how to completely block out the pain. He rationalized his entire childhood as a form of brutal training. His mother arrives, telling him to hurry up and get out of the hospital. Her smile fades as she reminds him of all the chores waiting at home. And so his life continued, a burden to the very people who caused his pain. The god holds the complete, unfiltered record of his life. Looks like someone's finally doing their homework, and the results are horrifying. This, she realizes, was the life of Mutu Kushina. She leans back, admitting his past life was truly something else. And then a shocking possibility begins to form in her mind. She recalls the function of indomitable spirit, a revival at the very brink of death. And its one impossible condition: the user must have no fear of death. A condition she had always believed to be an insurmountable wall for any living being. She knows it's not as simple as just deciding not to be afraid. The reason, she explains, is tied to the very concept of pain. Pain is a biological alarm, a core function designed to ensure survival. When the body is damaged, the brain registers it as a threat to its existence. This signal triggers powerful emotions: sadness, anger, and even despair. These emotions, she says, instinctively make any living thing fear pain. It's a fundamental, hardwired response, the fear of pain itself. No matter how small the threat, the instinct to survive and protect the body kicks in. Without that fear, a creature would simply ignore mortal danger until it was too late. And so, the fear of pain is intrinsically linked to the fear of death. To have no fear of death, therefore, means to have completely overcome the fear of pain. But the god dismisses this, believing such a feat to be utterly impossible. She insists it's not as simple as just deciding to endure the agony. Even those who actively seek an end to their own lives cannot escape the terror of the pain that awaits them in their final moments. A fear, she concludes, that is the very definition of a survival instinct. But then she stops, a name catching in her throat. Mutu Kushina. She stares at his file, wondering if his brutal life somehow let him conquer pain. If he truly feels nothing from pain, then he would have no fear of death. Back in the forest, the world comes crashing back into focus. Kushina lies on the ground, the adrenaline from his impossible revival finally fading. He groans, the pain a dull reminder that he's still alive next to the monster's corpse. He makes his way to the stream, his tattered clothes a testament to the battle. He looks back at the beast, confirming that it is, in fact, very dead. And he realizes that this monster at least can't kill him anymore. A single dawning thought begins to form in Kushina's mind. He laughs, realizing his luck was just as terrible as ever. His mind flashes back to his previous life, a constant, weary struggle. He remembers how his existence felt like a single agonizing journey, an endless, exhausting trek through a desolate and empty wasteland. He was so focused on just surviving from one day to the next that he never even considered the possibility of finding an escape. But then, one day, a profound realization struck him. He finally understood that for him, death was the only true salvation. And now, standing over the monster's corpse, that salvation has been denied. He recalls the god's words, how she claimed he had no luck this time. She had declared that with his 3 skills, survival was simply impossible. But if she was wrong about that, then maybe his chance to die isn't gone yet. Suddenly, an arrow whistles past his head, cutting his thoughts short. It explodes with concussive force, sending him flying through the air. The blast rips through him, a new wave of agony washing over his body. The forest floor erupts in a cloud of dirt and shrapnel. Before he can even land, a volley of arrows rains down from the trees. High above, a mysterious figure watches from a branch, bow in hand. The archer, a young woman, observes the boy she just tried to obliterate. The archer watches from above, realizing this boy is far more dangerous than she thought. The god's monitor reveals the truth behind Kushina's death in his first life. It wasn't an accident. A young Kushina stood before a busy highway. His heart pounded not with fear, but with a desperate final resolve. He deliberately stepped into the path of a speeding truck. In the present, the archer can only stare, calling him a dangerous man. But her words are laced with a strange, flustered uncertainty. Back in her office, the god's monitor finally goes dark. She slumps in her chair, muttering about how this all turned out. She can only conclude that Mutu Kushina is completely, utterly reckless. The god reveals she didn't just choose one reincarnator for this world. Her other candidate is a girl named Runa, and back in the forest, that very same girl is now hunting Kushina. She stops in her tracks, her eyes wide with utter disbelief. The smoke from her explosive arrow begins to clear from the crater. Through the haze, Kushina's silhouette stands, noting that he's still not dead. He casually remarks that the explosion hurt less than being hit by a truck. Runa can only stare from the trees, baffled that he survived the blast. Frustrated, she draws her bow, refusing to accept this outcome. She lets another arrow fly, determined to put him down for good. The arrow flies true, a simple projectile aimed to kill. But Kushina plucks it from the air, inches from his own eye. He seems almost surprised by its sudden appearance. From the trees, Runa demands the monster reveal its true form. Kushina simply echoes her words, a strange look on his face. In a flash, he's right in front of her, offering a chilling smile. She recoils in terror, and he calmly explains that this is his smile. Her mind flashes back to the beast, crushing his skull. She wonders if he's some unknown creature native to this strange new world. Kushina just listens, the term another world finally clicking into place. He recalls the god's words, the pieces finally clicking into place. Runa confirms it, describing the same bratty, smoking god he met. And apparently complaining about a deity has immediate, painful consequences. The god screams Runa's name, a phantom arrow sticking out of her head. To make matters worse, she realizes she's completely out of cigarettes. She crushes the empty pack, her divine composure utterly shattered. So much for her no-smoking pledge, she's off to buy a whole carton. She stomps away, utterly fed up with the whole ordeal. She complains that every reincarnator she chooses is just a handful. Back in the forest, Runa is still at a loss, demanding to know who he is. Kushina just stares back, his expression as empty as ever. Runa realizes they might be the same, both chosen by that god. But in her moment of realization, her foot catches on a stray root. A sudden yelp echoes from the trees, followed by a loud crash. The graceful archer tumbles through the air with absolutely zero dignity. Kushina is left wondering where his would-be assassin disappeared to. He finds her and asks if she's okay, warning her about the roots. Turns out she's been captured by a massive constricting snake. Kushina can only stare, trying to process this bizarre turn of events. The creature tightens its grip, ready to crush its newfound prey. Kushina is momentarily stunned by the sudden violent ambush. The massive serpent wraps its coils around Runa, squeezing with incredible force. The pressure intensifies, threatening to crush her ribs with every movement. She struggles against its grip, screaming for the beast to release her. Her face contorts in agony as the air is forced from her lungs. Kushina snaps out of his stupor, calling out to the trapped archer. She desperately yells at him to help, her assassin's pride completely forgotten. The snake's scales shift as it tightens its hold, a slow and deliberate execution. Spikes emerge from the creature's back, adding a new layer of torment to her predicament. A sickening crack echoes as her bones begin to give way under the strain. Runa's desperate cries for help echo as the snake tightens its coils. Kushina freezes, realizing the situation is far more dangerous than he thought. She wonders how anyone could possibly fight a monster of this magnitude. His mind races, but panic clouds his thoughts, leaving him unable to act. He hesitates, questioning why he should even bother saving her. After all, she's the one who just tried to turn him into a human pincushion. A dark thought crosses his mind. He'd have thanked her if she'd actually killed him. But despite his own wishes, he takes a single, decisive step forward. A painful memory surfaces, his mother's voice telling him no one ever helps the dying. He remembers the feeling of being broken and alone, with no hope of rescue. Runa's cries are choked off as the snake tightens its grip. The memory of his mother's voice echoes, justifying her cruelty. She screams at him to save her, her desperation overriding all else. Her pleas for help cut through his shock and indecision. She lets out a final, desperate roar for someone to save her life. The massive serpent continues its slow, brutal execution high in the trees. And in that moment, something inside Kushina finally clicks. He breaks into a sprint, charging toward the monster without a plan. He knows he has to do something, anything, to stop this, because he knows all too well what it's like to scream for a savior who never comes. His body moves on its own, a primal instinct overriding all rational thought. He acts before he can think, a reaction forged in a crucible of pain. A single desperate thought screams through his mind. He has to save her. He'll worry about the consequences later. Right now, someone needs help. He knows it's impossible, that he's powerless, but he strikes anyway. His fist connects with the monster's scales in a desperate, reckless blow. And to his own shock, the punch actually seems to have an effect. The serpent rears back, roaring in a mix of pain and surprise. Its coils loosen, sending both Kushina and Runa flying from the impact. Runa hits the ground, gasping for air, finally free from the creature's grip. Runa stares at the massive, unmoving serpent, completely stunned. Her eyes shift to Kushina, her mind struggling to process what she just saw. She asks him what he just did, but he seems just as clueless as she is. Kushina looks down at his own fist, a picture of pure confusion. And then the pain hits him, a delayed reaction that sends him screaming. Runa can only ask if he's the one responsible for felling the beast. Kushina can't answer, still reeling from the shock and the pain in his hand. He points at the corpse, complaining that it died from a single weak punch. He looks at his own hand, wondering if he somehow caused this impossible outcome. The horrifying truth dawns on him. One of his dud skills must have activated. The massive serpent lies motionless, its head resting on the cracked earth. Kushina stares at his fist, unable to believe his weak punch caused this. He struggles to understand what just happened, his mind reeling from the impossibility. The two of them stand in the quiet clearing, surrounded by the defeated monster. Runa breaks the silence, her voice hesitant and small. She bows her head, offering a genuine, if embarrassed, thank you for saving her. She even apologizes for, trying to murder him just a few minutes ago. Kushina is completely thrown off by this sudden display of gratitude. Runa admits she had mistaken him for just another monster of the forest. But now she knows the truth, asking if he's a reincarnator just like her. Runa pieces it together. His revival and the snake's defeat must be from his skills. But Kushina denies it, insisting his powers are only for healing himself. She looks at the dead monster, wondering what could have possibly killed it. Runa thoughtfully lists his 3 gifts: super regeneration, immortality, and indomitable spirit. She concludes that none of those skills should have any offensive power. But her words spark a memory for Kushina, who recalls her own strange ability. He asks about her talent for pulling arrows from thin air, a handy party trick. In response, Runa holds out her hands as a brilliant light begins to form. A bow materializes from nothing, a testament to her own divine gift. Kushina can only stare, realizing her power is far different from his own. She explains her skill is called creation, allowing her to make anything she understands. She offers him a new shirt, a peace offering after, trying to kill him. Kushina is completely flustered, managing to stammer out a thank you. He then asks if the explosive arrows were also her creation, and she looks away guiltily. She admits it was just a simple explosive attached to an arrow, a childish trick. With the air finally cleared, she properly introduces herself as Runa. Kushina, pulling on the new shirt, confirms he's from Japan and gives his name. Runa then asks him how to write his name, a strange question for the situation. He spells it out in the dirt, and she declares that for now, they aren't enemies. She looks out at the trees, stating they can't stay in this monster-infested forest. Runa suggests they find a village, proposing they travel together for safety. But Kushina immediately refuses, saying he'll pass on finding civilization. She's completely stunned by his rejection, demanding to know why. Instead of answering, he calmly grabs a thick vine hanging from a branch. He slips it around his neck with a terrifying smile, announcing he'll just die here. With a casual farewell, he kicks the rock from under his feet to hang himself. Runa snaps into action, tackling him and pulling him free from the makeshift noose. She screams at him, telling him not to be in such a rush to end it all. Kushina complains that she stopped him, explaining he hates having an audience. He coldly asks what right she has to interfere with what he does with his own life. Runa's eyes widen, reminding him that they were both killed once already. She argues that this new world, monsters and all, is a precious second chance. A brutal flashback reveals her own end, a hooded figure and a cold blade. The memory is still raw, bringing her to tears as she relives the trauma. She admits she doesn't understand his despair, but she has a proposal. If he's so determined to die, why not try fighting the forest monsters? Kushina can only stare back, completely baffled by her strange logic. He points out the obvious flaw. With his skills, he can't die, even if beheaded. Runa's resolve hardens. She wants to live and refuses to be killed again. She then asks Kushina what kind of power he has to fell a beast like this. Runa admits she knows it's a selfish request, using him for her own survival. She bows deeply before him, formally pleading for his help. With tears streaming down her face, she begs him to protect her. Kushina is completely stunned, unable to process her desperate plea. He can't fathom how anyone could want to live so badly in this terrifying world. He glances down at his own hand, the one that somehow felled a monster. He turns away, reminding her that with his skills, even beheading is no escape. But her raw, desperate will to live has clearly struck a chord. He doesn't know how he beat the snake or if he can even protect her. But with a quiet resolve, Kushina agrees to give it a try. Runa is left completely speechless by his unexpected agreement. Kushina mutters that he'd rather not take on this kind of responsibility, but Runa's mood brightens instantly, thanking him with a brilliant smile. Our boy is completely thrown, unused to this level of genuine gratitude. He can only stammer, overwhelmed by the sudden shift in their dynamic. She extends her hand, ready to seal their new, very strange partnership. He hesitantly accepts, and for the first time, he has an ally. With the deal struck, Runa immediately shifts into survival mode. But the first item on the agenda brings a wave of crushing reality. She panics, realizing they have to camp in this monster-infested death trap. Runa's panic is met with Kushina's quiet resignation. He's used to sleeping rough. But Runa takes charge, confidently declaring she was a Girl Scout. She lays out the plan: find water, food, and a safe place to make a fire. And so, the unlikely duo begins their trek through the dangerous woods. Kushina eyes a mushroom, wisely deciding against it. He knows a gamble when he sees one. Their search pays off as they discover a small cave, a perfect shelter for the night. Kushina tries to start a fire the old-fashioned way, earning a scolding from Runa. She reminds him they have skills, and while she could use her explosives, she has a much more elegant solution, creating a lighter from thin air. With a simple click, she shows him how easy it is to make fire in this new world. But her fancy lighter just clicks uselessly, refusing to produce a flame. She throws it away in frustration, realizing it's completely out of fuel. Turns out she can create the lighter but not the gas to make it work. Details, details. She mutters that she has a few choice words for the god who sent them here. Kushina can only watch, completely bewildered by this turn of events. But their fire-starting problems are suddenly interrupted as the cave itself begins to move. A colossal foot slams down, revealing their shelter isn't a cave at all. It's a massive rhino-like golem, and it has just woken up. The two reincarnators are frozen in shock, staring up at their new, very angry landlord. Runa snaps out of it first, screaming at Kushina that they need to run now. Without a second thought, Kushina shoves Runa out of the path of danger. But he's not fast enough to save himself as a spike tears through his back. Runa looks up in horror, realizing he's taken the blow meant for her. The massive spike lifts him clean off the ground, his body hanging limp. He dangles there, impaled and helpless before the colossal beast. He looks down at the wound, a gaping hole where his chest used to be. Runa can only scream, completely powerless to help him. But even impaled, Kushina grabs her, fully committing to his new unpaid bodyguard gig. The golem roars, charging forward with unstoppable momentum, and the earth itself erupts in a forest of deadly, razor-sharp spikes. Runa tumbles through the air, narrowly avoiding the forest of deadly spikes. Kushina hits the ground hard, having shoved her clear just in the nick of time. She can only stare in abject terror, her mind completely blank with fear. Kushina is sent flying, tossed aside like a rag doll by the sheer force of the attack. Runa scrambles to his side, desperately asking what they're supposed to do. But her panic is cut short by a sudden chilling sight. Kushina looks down at her with that same unsettling smile from his past. He calmly reminds her that he made a promise to keep her safe. And with that, he charges headfirst toward the colossal, rampaging golem. Runa can only scream after him, demanding to know if he even has a plan. Runa realizes this monster is on a completely different level from the others. But the gaping hole in Kushina's chest is already sealing itself shut. He leaps into the air, launching himself over the deadly forest of spikes. A wild, determined look fills his eyes as he closes the distance. He smashes through the spikes with his bare hands, ignoring the damage. The wound in his chest vanishes completely, his regeneration working overtime. He pushes forward, a relentless force of nature against an impossible foe. Runa screams that no matter how fast he heals, he'll never even reach it. And she's right, he's torn to shreds by another volley of spikes. His body is completely obliterated before he can even land a single blow. But even shredded to pieces, his consciousness clings to a single thought: not yet. He reforms, taunting the beast, begging it to kill him properly this time. His mind flashes to his promise, wondering what happens if he dies and fails her. He spits blood, questioning if Runa would ever forgive him for breaking his word. A dark smile forms as he remembers he's never been forgiven for anything in his life. He reasons that if he's dead, a broken promise won't matter anyway. But just as he gives in, a small object whistles past his head. An arrow, seemingly from nowhere, strikes the golem directly in the back. It detonates with a concussive blast, staggering the colossal monster. Kushina turns to see Runa, perched atop a spike, having fired the shot herself. Runa stands her ground, bow drawn and ready for another shot. She knows she can't hurt it, but she can at least get its attention. She creates a handful of small, spinning tops designed to make noise. The tops land all around the golem, creating a cacophony of sound. The beast is momentarily confused, its attention drawn by the racket. And that's all the opening Kushina needs to leap onto its back. He lands a desperate punch, trying to find any kind of weak spot. He looks back, a shocking realization dawning on him. She just saved his life. Runa yells at him, asking why he didn't just abandon her and run. But Kushina knows that if he runs, she'll be the one left behind to die. He screams that he won't let her be taken, driving his fist forward. But his hand shatters against the golem's impenetrable hide. Runa can only watch, realizing its defense is impossibly strong. The beast retaliates with a punch of its own, a fist of solid rock. The impact sends him flying, his body crushed by the blow. She can only call his name, trapped in the forest of deadly spikes. She wonders why he keeps fighting, apparently unfamiliar with his whole can't-die shtick. But Kushina just roars, channeling a lifetime of agony into this single moment. He winds up for another strike, his fist glowing with an unknown power. This time his punch connects with the force of a meteor. Runa can only watch, realizing he's truly trying to keep his promise. His fist connects, and the sound of shattering rock echoes through the forest. The golem's entire arm explodes into a shower of stone and dust. Kushina follows through, his expression a mask of pure, desperate focus. The colossal limb is reduced to nothing more than a pile of rubble. Runa calls out his name, fearing he's been buried in the aftermath. But from the wreckage, A single hand emerges, refusing to stay down. A wave of pure relief washes over her as she realizes he's alive. Kushina pulls himself free, complaining about a headache like he didn't just punch a mountain. She can only stare in awe, amazed that he actually defeated the monster. Kushina stares at his own fist, the shock of his actions finally setting in. He looks at the pile of rubble, barely able to believe he caused this destruction. He remembers how his first punch shattered his own arm against its hide. But a new, terrifying thought begins to take shape in his mind. What if the more damage he takes, the stronger he actually becomes? As the golem's rocky shell crumbles, the ground gives way beneath him. He's caught completely off guard by the monster's sudden collapse. The dust settles to reveal a smaller, core version of the beast, and a very naked Kushina, because priorities. Runa can only watch, screaming that he shattered the rock rhino's horn. And Kushina finally understands. The boy who was pierced and broken is now a weapon. The core of the beast is revealed, a smaller rhino stripped of its rocky armor. Runa questions if the monster was actually weak this entire time, but then her eyes widen as a different, more terrifying possibility clicks into place. It's not that the monster is weak, it's that Kushina is somehow growing stronger. The rhino pants heavily, its broken horn a testament to its fading strength. The creature stumbles forward, completely exhausted from the prolonged battle. It finally collapses to the ground, its energy completely spent. Runa realizes this is their chance. Kushina can actually defeat it now. Kushina looks down at his fist, a silent understanding passing through him. He clenches his hand, ready to unleash the very power born from his own destruction. Runa watches, her expression a mix of awe and utter terror. The weakened rhino lets out a low, guttural growl from the shadows. But its final act of defiance is a desperate, earth-shaking roar. A wave of scorching heat blasts from its maw, forcing Runa to shield her eyes. She realizes the temperature is rising, threatening to burn her alive. But Kushina charges through the inferno, his resolve completely unshaken. He drives his fist forward, a single decisive blow aimed at the beast's head. His eyes burn with a lifetime of pain, now focused into a single point. Runa can only watch, tears streaming as the heat becomes unbearable. The world flashes white as his fist makes contact with the monster. The shockwave sends Runa flying, shielding herself from the intense heat. She can only watch through her tears as the impossible unfolds before her. Kushina's punch lands, a final definitive end to the monster's rampage. The beast's entire head shatters into 1,000 pieces of stone. Its massive body is thrown backward, a testament to his newfound power. A close-up reveals the utter destruction of the creature's head. The golem's core crashes to the ground, its life force extinguished. It lies motionless, a defeated husk in the now silent forest. Kushina stands over the fallen beast, his promise finally fulfilled. He looks down, panting, trying to process the fact that he actually won. Kushina stands hunched over, completely spent from the battle. His fist is raw and bleeding, a testament to the impossible power he unleashed. He flexes his hand, still trying to comprehend what he's become. He turns to Runa, assuring her that the danger has finally passed. She can only stare back, her mind still reeling from the fight. The battlefield is silent, littered with the remains of the colossal golem. Runa looks down, her expression hidden as she processes the aftermath. A strange, hollow laugh escapes her lips, breaking the silence. She finally admits what they're both thinking. Kushina is terrifyingly strong. And then she collapses, because surviving a monster fight is apparently exhausting. Kushina rushes to her side, asking if she's injured. But Runa insists she's fine, that people from her family never cry. And yet a single tear rolls down Kushina's own cheek. Runa sits up, suddenly angry and flustered by his reaction. She yells at him not to look at her with such a pathetic expression. Especially, she adds, while he's completely and utterly naked. Our boy scrambles to cover himself, the post-battle reality finally setting in. Runa continues her tirade, telling him to stop staring at her like that. She then creates a new set of clothes, tossing them at him impatiently. Kushina can only stare, completely overwhelmed by the emotional whiplash. He's grateful for the clothes, but this is not the look he was going for. Runa admits with embarrassment that she accidentally made him her own uniform. The two of them stand exhausted in the clearing, the battle finally over. Later that night, they've set up a small camp to wait out the darkness. Kushina, now properly clothed, offers to take the first watch for the night. Runa refuses, telling him to get some rest while he can. She admits she needs some time alone to process everything that's happened. He quietly accepts, not wanting to push the matter further. He settles into the sleeping bag she made, watching her by the fire.
He thinks to himself that being used is something he's accustomed to.
But being thanked, being given clothes, these are feelings he's never known. As he tries to process it all, Runa keeps a silent vigil by the fire. She mulls over his skills, the raw, magic-like power he wields. It's a frustrating truth, but she knows she was useless against that monster. Her mind keeps circling back to Kushina's impossible abilities, and then a terrifying possibility clicks into place. It's not just that he's strong, he's actively becoming stronger. She runs through his list of gifts, super regeneration, which heals him in an instant. Immortality, which means he'll never grow old or die from age. An indomitable spirit, which brings him back from the very edge of oblivion. Runa remembers the god's words. His 3 skills were supposed to be useless. She recalls how his first punch against the golem only broke his own hand. Yet as he was torn apart and reformed, his punches grew impossibly strong. Even his speed increased, eventually matching the beast's furious charge. She knows this power must come from his skills, but none of them should work this way. She begins to question if those dud skills were really duds at all. A new hypothesis forms in her mind, a theory she can't simply ignore. What if the skills, useless on their own, create something new when combined? Meanwhile, Kushina sleeps peacefully, blissfully unaware of his own terrifying potential. She realizes that every time he dies, he doesn't just come back, he comes back stronger. The next morning, a new day dawns on the quiet forest. Kushina slowly stirs, the events of the previous night feeling like a dream. He jolts awake, realizing he fell asleep and failed to keep watch. He looks over to see the campfire has long since died out. For a moment, he's lost, forgetting he's no longer in his old world. But a sudden movement snaps him back to the present. He looks up to find Runa standing over him, holding a massive rock. She asks if he fell asleep on purpose, trying to get himself killed. Her words trigger another memory, his mother, always angry, always irritated. He remembers how she would take out all her frustrations on him. The memory continues, showing his mother standing over his sleeping form. But after her fits of rage, a wave of profound guilt would wash over her. In those moments, she would hold him tight in a desperate, pained embrace. A young Kushina could only apologize, not even understanding what for. She would weep, begging his forgiveness for being such a terrible mother. And seeing her tears, he could never bring himself to truly hate her. But it was a vicious, repeating cycle of anger followed by apology. He learned early on that a person's heart is a fickle, inconsistent thing. It can turn from ally to enemy in the blink of an eye, a truth he knows well. And because he understands this so deeply, he's not surprised when he sees Runa standing over him with a rock. A weary resignation washes over him as he thinks, "Here we go again." He calmly addresses the girl who seems to have a thing for trying to kill him. He tells her it's fine if she wants to kill him. He wanted to die anyway. Runa is completely thrown by his utter lack of self-preservation. She frantically tries to explain that this isn't what it looks like at all, though she admits that yes, the optics of the situation are not great. Kushina is left utterly bewildered by this bizarre turn of events. She drops the rock, explaining she had a theory about his skills she had to test. He just accepts her apology, figuring this is just how some people are. Kushina asks her to explain the theory she has about his skills. Runa lays it out. His 3 dud skills are interacting with each other. She asks if he's even aware that his own body is getting stronger. Kushina can only deny it, completely oblivious to his own power-up. His mind flashes back to the battle, to the impossible force of his own fists. Runa presses him, asking if he truly hasn't noticed the change. She points out that he has no strength-enhancing skills, yet he can fell monsters. She concludes that under specific conditions, he's somehow gaining power. The revelation hits Kushina like a ton of bricks, leaving him speechless. Meanwhile, back in her office, the god has clearly restocked on her favorite vice. She's furious that the convenience store clerk made her use the brand name. And to add insult to injury, they even had the nerve to ask for ID. She plops into her chair, sarcastically telling her charges to learn from her example. Back in the forest, Kushina is still trying to wrap his head around Runa's theory. But before he can ask any more questions, Runa suddenly lunges forward. She picks up the very same rock she was holding over his head moments ago. And with a sickening crunch, she brings it down on his unsuspecting arm. Kushina's eyes widen in a mix of shock and sudden sharp pain. Runa lifts the rock again, her brutal experiment clearly not over yet. She brings it down once more, testing the limits of his bizarre power. Runa announces she's going again, the rock still poised for another strike. Kushina calmly tells her there's no need to be so tense about it. She insists she'll keep going until she gets a definitive result from her experiment. With a determined cry, she raises the rock high above her head once more. The sound of stone meeting bone echoes through the otherwise quiet clearing. Runa is panting, sweating, clearly putting her all into this brutal test. Again and again, she brings the rock down with sickening, repetitive force. Kushina just watches, his expression a mask of weary, detached acceptance. She's completely exhausted, her breath coming in ragged, desperate gasps. The scientist of this duo is clearly more tired than the actual test subject. With a final, desperate cry, she brings the rock down once more. Kushina's arm tenses, bracing for yet another painful, bone-jarring impact. But this time it's the rock that shatters, not his arm. Kushina can only stare, shocked as stone fragments fly past his face. Runa is just as stunned, her experiment yielding an impossible result. His arm is completely unharmed while her weapon lies broken at his feet. The once solid rock is now nothing more than a pile of useless rubble. Runa looks at her own hand, her brutal hypothesis finally proven correct. She asks Kushina if he's ever heard the term super recovery. He assumes it's just another skill, but she quickly tells him he's wrong. Kushina can only stare, the gears in his mind slowly turning. Runa explains it's a natural phenomenon, a basic healing function of the human body. She gives him a quick biology lesson. When you work out, you tear down muscle tissue. But when that tissue heals, it doesn't just repair itself, it grows back stronger. This process, she explains, is called super recovery. Who knew attempted murder came with a free science class? But she's not done yet, adding that this principle applies to more than just muscles. Even bones, when fractured, will mend themselves to be more durable than before. Of course, for a normal person, there are limits. A lost limb is gone for good. She looks at Kushina, making it clear that he is anything but normal. Because his skill, super regeneration, can restore his body even from total destruction. She explains that every time he heals, his body is rebuilding itself to be stronger than before. Kushina is stunned by the revelation, but Runa warns him there's a major flaw in this process. She continues, explaining that his regeneration is fueled by rapid, repeated cell division. And now, for a quick biology lesson, normal cells have a finite number of divisions before they die. Back in her office, the god recalls the catch. His regeneration has a limit, and if he exceeds it, he dies for good. But Runa holds up 2 fingers, revealing that his second skill, immortality, completely negates that weakness. Kushina is speechless as she explains that being ageless removes the natural limit on his cell division. Still, she admits that even with those 2 skills, if he dies, he's supposed to stay dead. But Runa's eyes burn with intensity as she tells him his skills can overcome even death itself. And it's all thanks to the final piece of the puzzle, his indomitable spirit. She explains that his desire to die is ironically what triggers the skill that brings him back. Kushina can only stare, the weight of her words hitting him all at once. Runa continues, explaining that his 3 skills work in perfect synergy. He struggles to comprehend, his mind unable to grasp the impossible truth. And back in her office, the god watches the entire conversation play out. Her expression shifts from casual observation to pure, unadulterated panic. The horrifying reality of her mistake finally dawns on her. Looks like someone's getting a bad performance review. Kushina is still lost, trying to understand the conclusion she's leading him to. Runa spells it out for him. The more he dies, the stronger he becomes. Every time he's broken, his regeneration doesn't just fix him, it improves him. Runa finishes her explanation, her voice low and serious. His immortality skill allows for infinite cell division, removing all natural limits. And his indomitable spirit lets him survive any fatal blow with a single hit point. Kushina stammers, the horrifying implications finally dawning on him. But his reaction isn't one of shock or awe, it's something far more unsettling. A wide, manic grin spreads across his face, a picture of pure insanity. Runa can only stare in horror, wondering what kind of monster she's unleashed. Kushina covers his face, a broken laugh escaping his lips. He's taking the news of his newfound godhood surprisingly well. Runa is completely thrown, his bizarre reaction overriding her own concerns. And then he lets out a raw, agonized scream that echoes through the forest. His scream turns into a desperate rant about why he can never die properly. He recalls all his failed attempts, even surviving things that should have been fatal. Runa can only stare, completely lost by his sudden, violent breakdown. He curses the god of fate for this cruel joke, for making him stronger through suffering. A horrifying thought strikes him. Was the god he met the one responsible for this? Runa tries to calm him down, but he's too lost in his own despair to listen. But then his spiral is cut short by a sudden terrible realization. He reasons that if external wounds won't kill him, he'll just have to get creative. He grabs a nearby mushroom and shoves it in his mouth without hesitation. Runa can only watch in horror as he tries to poison himself to death. His face contorts, sweat pouring as the poison begins to take hold. Runa panics, screaming at him to spit it out before it's too late. But instead of collapsing, his expression shifts to one of utter, blissful shock. He holds out the half-eaten mushroom, telling her it's unbelievably delicious. Taking another bite, he insists it's the best thing he's ever eaten in his life. He even claims to be feeling better, his earlier despair completely forgotten. Runa can only stare dumbfounded as he eagerly looks for another one. She thinks of her own hunger, having been too scared to eat any of the local wildlife. Kushina points to other mushrooms, cheerfully noting how they seem to be breathing. And Runa finally understands the mushroom is poisonous and our boy is hallucinating. Kushina's eyes swirl, his mind completely lost in the mushroom's potent poison. In his hallucination, Runa has transformed into a hulking, muscle-bound warrior. He ecstatically begs this new, terrifying Runa to end his life with her powerful arms. And then he's off, sprinting through the forest at an impossible, poison-fueled speed. Runa chases after him, desperately trying to remind him of his promise to protect her. For a brief, fleeting moment, a spark of clarity seems to return to his eyes. He continues to run, and Runa spots what looks like a settlement in the distance. She dismisses it at first, assuming it's just another one of his wild hallucinations. But it's real. They've stumbled upon a stone tower and a massive wooden gate. A guard calls down from a window, offering to open the gate for the two weary travelers. The gate opens, revealing a cobblestone path and a world beyond the forest. They step into a bustling town, a sight for sore eyes after days of wilderness. The two of them walk through the streets, finally surrounded by civilization. Runa is ecstatic, her face lighting up at the sight of a real living town. Kushina agrees, though his face is now covered in a nasty rash from the mushroom. He assures her the poison has worn off, but she notes his skills must be working overtime. The wave of relief is too much for Runa, who collapses from sheer exhaustion. A large, calloused hand reaches down, offering to help her to her feet. She gratefully accepts the stranger's kindness, a rare sight in this world. But her savior is a battle-hardened warrior, a severed monster head slung over his shoulder. So much for a warm welcome. Runa is completely terrified by the warrior's intimidating presence, but his gruff exterior gives way to a booming, hearty laugh inside a local tavern. He asks if they really mistook his party for monsters from the forest. Soon they're all sharing a meal, the adventurers apologizing for their intense aura. Runa can barely hold back tears, savoring her first real food in days. The warrior explains they're seasoned mercenaries, noting the two kids are clearly rookies. He then pulls out a flyer, asking what they know about the forest they just left. It's a bounty for a creature so powerful, even 10 veterans couldn't defeat it. Kushina's eyes widen, a dangerous and potentially profitable idea forming in his mind. The warrior warns him that if he sees this beast, his only option is to run for his life. The warriors laugh, warning them that it's too soon for rookies to be earning coin here. A waitress approaches the table, offering another round of drinks for the rowdy group. She seems concerned, asking if they're sure they can afford such a large order. The mercenaries just keep eating, bragging about their own easy monster hunts for the day. But in a flash, the warriors are gone, dashing out of the tavern without paying their tab. Runa and Kushina are left stunned as the waitress turns her attention to them. She presents them with a towering stack of plates, the bill for the entire table. With a stern expression, she demands to know just how much money they have. The horrifying reality of the situation dawns on our two broke heroes. Welcome to civilization, kids. Runa can only admit the truth. They don't have a single coin to their names. A massive monster carcass is dragged across the tavern floor. The waitress and other patrons can only stare, completely stunned by the offering. And just like that, their debt is settled, leaving the tavern behind. A heavy sack of coins is dropped, their payment for the monster parts. Kushina examines the strange new currency, their first earnings in this world. He tells Runa that while he's unsure of its value, it more than covered their bill. He's impressed that Runa has already figured out the local economy. She retorts that it's easy when your partner can casually defeat powerful beasts. She points to a bounty board, lamenting the fortune they missed on the monsters he already killed. Kushina realizes being an unkillable monster magnet has its financial perks. Runa laments that they can't even remember where they left the bodies. But Kushina sees the bounty board as a menu of potential assassins. He thinks about his promise to Runa, a vow that keeps him from seeking death. He looks at his hand, realizing monsters feel less and less like a real threat. If he keeps fighting and regenerating just to keep his word to her, a horrifying thought dawns on him. He might actually become unkillable. Their existential crisis is suddenly interrupted by a small, hesitant voice. A young girl approaches, asking if they're the strong ones who can defeat monsters. With desperate eyes, she begs them to kill the beast that took her father's life. The monster in question is the wind tiger, a top-tier predator from their own forest. The girl explains her father was a strong and respected adventurer, but even his skill was no match for the beast that took his life. Runa listens as the girl asks them to avenge her fallen father. She understands the desire for revenge, but the risk is far too great. She pulls Kushina aside, needing a moment to talk some sense into him. Runa warns him that this wind tiger is far stronger than anything they've faced. He agrees they shouldn't risk it for a stranger, then decides they'll do it anyway. Runa is left completely speechless by his baffling change of heart. He turns back, reminding her of the one thing he's always wanted. A manic grin spreads across his face. This monster might finally kill him for good. Runa is left stammering, completely blindsided by his death wish. She warns him that he has no idea what he's up against with the wind tiger. She screams that every time it kills him, he'll just regenerate and get stronger. Eventually, she warns, he'll become so powerful that nothing can kill him. The words hit him hard, the horrifying irony finally sinking in. He doubles down, deciding he just needs to die faster before it's too late. But Runa points out a critical flaw in his desperate plan. His indomitable spirit only works because he doesn't fear death. She tells him plainly, no matter how hard he tries, he can't die. The truth finally breaks him, and he screams in utter, helpless despair. Runa stands before the broken boy, her expression unreadable. She continues her thought, laying out the cruel logic of his power. If he ever finds joy in living, his skill will simply stop working. The word joy hangs in the air, a concept he can't even begin to grasp. He desperately asks how he's supposed to find something he's never known. For the first time, Runa seems to be at a loss for words. She tells him that finding the will to live is ultimately up to him. She explains that his world has become too small, focused only on death. She tells him to look beyond his suffering and see the world around him. And for the first time, a flicker of something other than despair appears in his eyes. Her words sink in, telling him to finally see the world around him. He turns to her, saying there's something he needs to know first. He asks if it really matters to her whether he lives or becomes truly unkillable. Runa deflects, suddenly very interested in their budget and lodging. He tells her she can survive on her own now without his protection. He presses her, asking why she's even trying to stop his plan. Runa is left completely stunned, unable to form a coherent response. She finally stammers that she's not as cold-hearted as he thinks, which is debatable. She admits that despite him being strange, they're companions from the same world. Looking him in the eye, she tells him she doesn't want him to be unhappy. Her words land, a flicker of genuine shock in his otherwise empty eyes. Runa scoffs, calling him out for asking after just plotting his own demise. Kushina clenches his fist, struggling to find the words for this new feeling. He asks quietly if avoiding this fight will truly save him from unhappiness. Runa is taken aback, completely unprepared for his earnest, vulnerable question. She shouts that she can't possibly know the answer to something like that. Kushina can only stare, bewildered by her sudden, passionate outburst. She insists she can't make irresponsible promises about his future happiness. But she admits with a blush that his question did make her a little happy. She realizes that maybe, just maybe, she was wrong about not understanding him. Runa smiles, offering a simple yet profound piece of logic. She tells him that not wanting to be unhappy is just another way of saying he wants to be happy. The idea hits Kushina with the force of a physical blow. Could it really be that simple? Their philosophical debate is interrupted by the little girl, who's been waiting patiently. Runa is caught off guard, trying to find a way to explain their very adult conversation. But Kushina turns to the girl and, with a heavy heart, tells her they can't take the job. Runa is stunned, grabbing him and demanding to know why he's backing down now. He ignores her, his gaze fixed on the girl as he offers a quiet apology. The child's face falls, her last hope crumbling before her very eyes. But instead of crying, she bows deeply, a desperate, silent plea for them to reconsider. Runa stands in the alley, watching Kushina with a conflicted expression. She tries to reassure herself, saying this was the right choice for him. But her train of thought is derailed by a sudden horrifying sight. Kushina is smiling, a wide, unsettling grin that seems completely out of place. Runa is completely thrown, demanding to know what's so funny about crushing a child's hope. He tries to quote a proverb about smiling, but she retorts that his smile would scare off demons. But his eyes tell a different story, one of a boy who just wants to be happy. For the first time, he has chosen a path that doesn't involve fighting. Later that day, they find an inn to rest, the town settling down for the evening. Kushina sits up in bed, the morning light doing little to lift his spirits. He stretches with a yawn, remarking on how well he slept for the first time. But his peaceful morning is shattered by a sudden, terrified scream. He turns to see Runa being devoured by her own bed, which is now a monster. The innkeeper calmly explains she was testing out a new mimic bed feature. Apparently, customer feedback has been mixed. Runa struggles against the slime, wondering what would have happened if she'd been eaten. Kushina, however, is completely unfazed, finding his own monster bed rather comfortable. The creature even seems to like him, playfully patting his face with a slimy tendril. It reminds him of a happy memory, leaving Runa utterly baffled by his reaction. Later, as they head downstairs, Runa lays out their plan to visit the market. She suggests they explore the town, hoping he might finally find something interesting in this world. Kushina mulls over her words, a chance to finally learn about the world. But their quiet moment is shattered by the sound of heavy approaching footsteps. They both turn, startled as their path is suddenly blocked. A group of town guards stands before them, their expressions grim and unforgiving. The captain accuses them of attacking other adventurers and stealing their monster kills. He declares that after a trial, if they are found guilty of these crimes, they will be sentenced to death. Well, that's one way to get Kushina's attention. The scene cuts to a bizarrely cheerful Runa, introducing herself like a TV host. But the reality is far less glamorous as she tearfully announces a segment on isekai food. Their first meal as criminals is a simple tray of bread and watery soup. Runa takes a bite of the prison bread, noting it's as hard as a rock. She inspects the slice, wondering about its questionable quality, and discovers the other side is covered in a vibrant, colorful mold. So much for 5-star accommodations. She throws it against the wall in disgust, shouting that the hidden flavor isn't very hidden. A small, rat-like creature scurries over to investigate the discarded meal. It takes one bite and immediately collapses, foaming at the mouth. Defeated, Runa decides to just stick with the watery soup instead. She takes a sip only to realize it's just flavorless hot water. Runa shakes the bars of their cell, completely at her wit's end. Kushina calmly notes this is his first time in a cage, prompting an angry retort from Runa. A hooded guard patrols the hall, telling the noisy prisoners to shut up. Runa desperately pleads their case, insisting they're not criminals. Kushina, however, is happily eating the moldy bread, finding it quite tasty. His palate is certainly an acquired one. The guard reappears shouting that criminals get what they deserve. He threatens to throw them into a punishment cell with no light. But another guard arrives, telling his partner to stop pretending to be on watch. He drags the hooded man away, telling him to stop loitering near the cells. The truth is revealed. With enough money, even prisoners can live in luxury. Runa realizes the guard's threats were just a performance, an act to scare them. She despairs, knowing that if this continues, they'll be branded as criminals for good. Runa's hand glows as she realizes she has a skill of her own. She remembers her ability to create objects, manifesting a simple spoon. She tells Kushina they'll have to use their skills to somehow escape this prison. But before her grand escape plan can begin, a guard's heavy boot stops outside their cell. He announces that a summons has come from the church. It's time for their trial. They're led from the dungeon to a large, imposing courthouse in the center of town. Inside, they stand in the defendant's box, facing a judge and a full gallery. The crowd is filled with the very townspeople they'd hoped to get to know. All eyes are on them, the two outsiders now branded as dangerous criminals. The judge, a stern man with a long white beard, calls the court to order. When asked for his details, Kushina can only state that he has no fixed address. The judge then turns to Runa, who proudly announces her full name, Runa Kakyoin. The name causes a stir in the crowd, who whisper about her foreign origins. Kushina finally connects the dots, remembering her family's motto about never crying. He turns to her, admitting he'd been wondering what her last name was. With a small, genuine smile, he tells her that Kakyoin is a cool name. Runa is left completely flustered, her composure shattered by the simple compliment. Their moment is cut short as the judge demands the defendants show some respect. Runa turns away, unable to hide her embarrassment from Kushina's comment. The judge explains that their fate rests in the hands of a jury chosen from the citizens, so no pressure. Kushina sits uncomfortably in the defendant's box, a stranger in a strange land. The judge's voice is grim as he explains that if they are found guilty of robbery, the sentence will be death, a word that sends a chill down Runa's spine. Kushina, on the other hand, seems to be considering the death penalty as a potential career move. The judge then calls upon the captain of the guard to present the facts of the case. The captain lays out the accusation. They attacked other adventurers and stole their kills. Runa is furious, wondering who could have possibly reported such a blatant lie. The camera pans to the crowd, revealing the accuser, the very same girl they'd refused to help. Both Runa and Kushina stare in disbelief, recognizing the child immediately. He realizes this is her revenge for turning down her quest, a cruel lesson that no good deed goes unpunished. Runa explodes in anger, demanding they bring out the so-called victim. The girl simply tells them to look, confirming she's the one who made the report. The judge interrupts, his expression grim as he turns his attention back to them. The captain presents the sack of coins they earned, an impossibly large sum for a single day's work. The judge acknowledges the evidence, but a single word hints at a contradiction. A witness is called to explain the typical earnings of an adventurer. He places 2 small coins on the table, the average pay for a day of monster hunting. The judge notes the massive discrepancy between their earnings and the norm. Even the townsfolk murmur amongst themselves, sensing something isn't quite right. But Runa's mind is racing, and she suddenly realizes the flaw in the prosecution's case. The judge concedes that large bounties exist, but only for well-prepared teams. He then points out that these 2 newcomers somehow managed it on their own. Runa shouts back that it's impossible, that they must have cheated to earn that much. The crowd begins to murmur, their own suspicions now voiced by the defendant. The gallery erupts, calling them thieves and a danger to the entire town. Runa freezes, realizing her outburst has only condemned them further. The captain of the guard smirks, knowing the impression of guilt is now set in stone. She understands that with the jury of citizens turned against them, the truth is irrelevant. A wave of panic hits her. She's losing control of the trial. She finally shouts the case's fatal flaw. This whole trial is a sham without a real victim. Runa points an accusing finger, demanding to know if the girl made the false report. She leans forward, shouting that there's no victim to even present. But her outburst only earns her the sharp end of several guard spears. She freezes, realizing she's just made their situation infinitely worse. The judge calmly states that a victim isn't necessary for suspicion. He tells her the burden of proof is on them to convince the jury. Runa's mind reels. They're being punished for being too good at their job. So much for meritocracy. She turns to Kushina, begging him to defend himself against the lies. But Kushina remains silent, his head bowed in quiet contemplation. He's lost in a memory, recalling how his parents always assumed he was a thief. Runa desperately tries to get his attention, telling him to just stay silent. But Kushina suddenly stands and walks toward the center of the courtroom. He calmly states that if they doubt he was the one who killed the monster, he'll be more than happy to prove his strength right here and now. Runa panics, realizing his helpful demonstration is just digging their grave deeper. The judge simply clears his throat, unfazed by the bizarre offer. He turns to the jury, asking if they have reached a decision. The jurors look amongst themselves, weighing the guilt of the 2 outsiders. They whisper to one another, their minds already made up. And the verdict is clear, these 2 simply cannot be trusted. Runa is sweating bullets, realizing just how bad this situation has become. The entire courtroom is leaning towards a guilty verdict, and she's running out of time. Kushina quietly apologizes, feeling completely useless in this new kind of battle. Runa coldly tells him it's fine. She wasn't expecting his help anyway. Her words hit him harder than any physical blow ever could. He thinks back on his power, a curse he still can't accept. But he remembers that for a moment, his strength made her happy. He wonders if, just for a moment, he got carried away by that feeling. Runa clenches her fist, blaming that very power for landing them in this mess. She knows they can't expect justice in this world, but she's not ready to give up. Runa screams at him not to give up, to fight against this absurd accusation. Her passionate plea finally breaks through his wall of resignation. She turns to the court, declaring there's not a single shred of evidence against them. Runa accuses them of being ready to kill based on nothing but a hollow sense of justice. Her words hit home, and the jury members begin to look uncertain. Kushina watches, realizing her voice has single-handedly shifted the courtroom's mood. He sees her fighting desperately all on her own against an entire town. He wants her words to reach them, but he knows the odds are stacked against her. The jury whispers, their bias clear. When it comes to outsiders, a guilty verdict is easy. But Kushina realizes something has changed. He wants to see more of this world before he dies. But Kushina realizes something else. With his power, he can escape. Meanwhile, Runa is still being held back by the guards, unable to break free. He clenches his fists, knowing his opponents aren't monsters this time, they're human. He decides to act, making sure to hold back against the fragile humans. Instead of the guards, he aims his fist at a massive stone gargoyle on the wall. The entire courtroom looks up in terror, thinking the statue is coming to life. Even the girl who accused them stares in wide-eyed, abject horror. Kushina's fist connects, sending a shockwave through the solid stone. The entire gargoyle is launched from its perch, flying across the courtroom. It smashes through the massive doors, crashing into the street outside. The stone beast soars through the air, a testament to Kushina's raw power. Back inside, he's surrounded, using a guard's own spear to defend Runa. But a look of horror crosses his face as he realizes he couldn't hold back. He looks at the destruction, knowing he misjudged his own incredible strength. Outside, the gargoyle's stone eyes crack open. This is no longer just a statue. The creature rises, a living monster born from the courthouse wall. So much for a quiet escape. Kushina stares in disbelief, wondering how he managed to create this thing. He tries to explain his plan was just to knock out the guards and run, but he admits that a giant monster suddenly appearing wasn't part of the plan. He clenches his fist, realizing he failed to control his power, with terrifying results. He realizes with dawning horror that if he'd hit a person, they'd be dead. The terrifying truth sinks in. He has no control over this monstrous power. A guard cautiously approaches, asking if he's been injured in the chaos. But Kushina just grins, snapping the guard's spear with his bare hands. He laments that with this strength he can't even pet a kitten anymore. Priorities, I guess. But the chaos is interrupted by the sound of heavy, armored footsteps. A young, blonde-haired adventurer arrives, surprised to see a gargoyle in town. He seems more curious than alarmed by the sudden monster appearance. A boy in the crowd calls out his name, Agate. The townspeople flock to him, their fear turning to relief at the hero's arrival. The guard is shocked that Runa doesn't recognize the town's apparent celebrity. A local boy proudly announces that Agate is the strongest adventurer in town. The crowd is completely at ease, certain their hero can handle a mere gargoyle. Kushina watches the monster fly away, wondering why it's already being hunted. Agate turns to Kushina, asking if he's the one who brought the creature down. The hero scratches his head, trying to remember why there was a trial in the first place. The townspeople explain the situation, detailing the impossibly large bounty they earned. Agate listens intently, connecting the dots between the trial and Kushina's raw power. He considers the possibility that they were accused of robbing other, stronger adventurers. The crowd erupts in laughter, now convinced the whole trial was a ridiculous mistake. The crowd warns them not to cause any more trouble, the tension still thick in the air. But the fear has turned to dismissal, the townspeople now just wanting them to leave. Runa is furious, incensed by their casual attitude after putting them through a sham trial. Agate turns to the judge, calmly asking if anyone was actually injured in the chaos. The young accuser can only stammer, her false confidence completely gone. Agate just smiles, complimenting the girl on her apparent nerve. An interesting interrogation tactic. Runa tries to explain, reminding everyone that this all started with the girl's quest. The girl looks to Agate, quietly asking if he can just make this all go away. Runa knows it doesn't matter what she says. Her forgiveness means nothing here. Agate simply smiles, telling the girl that the final decision is up to her. The captain of the guard leaves the matter in Agate's capable hands. Agate casually remarks that while it was a hassle, they're no longer facing execution. But Runa's expression is still clouded with doubt and suspicion. She wonders how a monster could appear inside such well-fortified walls. Something about this whole situation feels staged, and she can't shake the feeling. Agate turns back with a knowing smile, asking if it all seems a little too convenient. He cheerfully tells them to follow him, much to Runa's complete confusion. He then points directly at Kushina, insisting that he come along as well. Nearby, two scavengers plot to steal parts from the gargoyle for a quick profit. But when they look up, they realize their prize has vanished, along with the adventurers. Elsewhere, a man with an eye patch proudly shows off a monster horn. But his satisfaction turns to pure shock as something impossible happens. The horn in his hand suddenly transforms into a worthless piece of wood. The scene cuts to a quiet, lonely graveyard on the edge of town. A robed woman sits among the tombstones, waiting with a solemn expression. Agate arrives with Kushina and Runa, calling out cheerfully to the woman. She looks up, a wave of relief washing over her as she confirms their plan worked. Runa is completely lost as Agate suggests they all get properly introduced. He introduces himself and his companion, an adventurer named Ricard. Looks like this whole thing was a setup. Ricard humbly deflects the praise, insisting Agate is the town's true number one. Runa realizes this is why Agate is so trusted by everyone in town. Agate smiles, recalling how she suspected the situation was far too convenient. He cheerfully admits the entire chaotic trial was a play they orchestrated. Ricard confirms that the gargoyle was nothing more than a convincing fake. Agate explains their plan was simply to create a distraction to get them out. Kushina is stunned they cleared his name with such a show of force, but he laments that his immense power has cost him the right to pet kittens. A truly tragic loss. His mind flashes back to a memory of a small dog, a reminder of his lost gentleness. Runa just tells them to ignore him, completely done with his bizarre tangents. She admits the gargoyle looked real, but Ricard points out it was just made of wood. Ricard explains her skill has its limits, which is why the fake monster was so basic. Runa is floored, admitting she was completely fooled by the wooden puppet. Agate just laughs it off, happy that their plan to save them worked out. But Kushina isn't celebrating, his expression remaining cold and distant. His eyes narrow as he processes their elaborate and very convenient rescue. He looks down at the two adventurers, demanding to know their true purpose. Runa snaps back to reality, realizing he has a very good point. Kushina points out that no one would orchestrate a jailbreak for complete strangers. He asks them to drop the act and reveal why they really helped them. Guess there's no such thing as a free get-out-of-jail card. Agate's friendly demeanor cracks, replaced by a knowing, almost predatory grin. Agate admits Kushina was sharp to see through their ruse, leaving Runa stunned. He then reveals their true motive, holding up a drawing of a colossal ancient tree. Elsewhere, two guards on the town wall find the same flyer, dismissing it as wind-blown trash. But a closer look reveals a massive bounty, far greater than any they've seen before. One of them points to the horizon, where the very same tree stands, dominating the landscape. The younger guard is shocked to learn that the tree itself is considered a monster. It's known as the Immortal leaf tree, a plant-based beast of immense age and power. The senior guard explains it has stood for thousands of years, and its sap is a vital magical component. He clarifies that this is a collection quest, which is why the reward is so astronomical. The younger guard dreams of easy money, but his partner warns him it's a fool's errand. The guard explains that to harvest from the tree, one must deal with the powerful monsters it attracts. He grimly states that the quest isn't just a collection, it requires a sacrifice. Back in the present, the four adventurers stand before the colossal ancient tree. Agate finally reveals their plan, while they collect the sap. Kushina's job is to be the bait, the sacrifice to keep the monsters busy. Well, that's one way to offer a job. Kushina turns to Runa, asking if she's really okay with this arrangement. He's visibly conflicted, his newfound resolve already being tested. He just decided to stop actively seeking death, and now this perfect opportunity has appeared. He looks up at the tree, knowing full well that Runa is interested in its magical sap. Runa admits that as a magic user, the material is tempting, but she's clearly torn. Kushina recalls his helplessness during the trial, admitting he couldn't do a thing. He remembers how Runa was the one who fought for them when he was powerless. He decides that since fighting is all he's good for, he'll accept the role. Agate confirms his decision, while Runa looks on with a worried expression. The hero muses that calling the job a sacrifice is a rather grim term, but he explains that's the official title for anyone who takes on this mission. Ricard details the plan. Wounding the tree will cause it to attack with its roots. Kushina's job is to endure the onslaught until they've collected enough sap. So, a glorified, unkillable punching bag. Agate cheerfully declares it's time to get started, holding up a strange root. He crushes it, saying a demonstration is better than a long-winded explanation. A large clay pot is tied to the tree, ready to collect the precious sap. Agate unsheaths his sword, the blade glinting in the dim light. Without a moment's hesitation, he swings the weapon with practiced ease. The sword bites deep into the ancient bark of the Immortal leaf tree. A thick, dark liquid begins to ooze from the fresh wound. The valuable sap drips slowly, one drop at a time, into the waiting pot. Runa wonders aloud just how long this tedious collection process will take. but Agate's head snaps up, sensing the ground begin to tremble beneath them. The earth cracks and splits apart as a deep rumbling echoes through the forest. Massive roots erupt from the ground, the tree itself lashing out in fury. So much for a simple collection quest. Runa cries out, feeling the immense pressure of the tree's sudden, violent assault. But Kushina is already moving, shattering a massive root with a single, powerful punch. He stands his ground, ready for more, as Runa watches in stunned silence. The wooden tendril splinters into 1,000 pieces from the sheer force of his blow, but for every root he destroys, a dozen more descend from the canopy above. Runa asks Agate if the onslaught will ever stop, but he confirms it won't. He explains the roots will relentlessly attack the sacrifice until the job is done. Ricard struggles with the sap collection as Runa realizes she's on duty too. So much for just supervising. Agate suddenly shouts, his friendly demeanor completely gone. He declares with fierce conviction that he won't let anyone become a sacrifice. Agate explains this is precisely why he needed Kushina's incredible power. Ricard brandishes her massive scythe, vowing that they will all fight together. The crystal embedded in her weapon begins to glow with a brilliant light. She unleashes a powerful wave of energy, slicing through the attacking roots. Runa can only stare in awe, witnessing true, powerful magic for the first time. As he continues his barrage, Kushina asks just how long he has to endure this. Runa learns the grim truth. Filling just one pot will take an entire night. Agate laughs, explaining the tree will slow after sunset, allowing them to rest. So it's less of a sprint, more of a marathon of getting beaten up. With a look of grim determination, Runa accepts that she has no choice but to fight. Agate admits that without their help, he and Ricard would have been overwhelmed. Agate shouts that they're counting on Kushina's power, ordering him to make it back alive. Kushina quietly accepts, saying he'll do his best to repay them for their help. Ricard rallies the group, telling them to hold out until the sun finally goes down. Hours pass as the brutal, relentless battle rages deep into the night. Runa is completely spent, gasping for air as the endless fight takes its toll. As the roots finally slow, the exhausted team gets a much-needed moment's reprieve. Runa complains that their plan was reckless, one wrong move away from total collapse. Even Agate has to admit that this particular job is far from a walk in the park. Ricard explains that most of the town's other adventurers are already injured. Agate reveals the cause, the very same wind tiger they were warned about. He explains a massive subjugation force was once formed to hunt the beast. Agate admits that he and Ricard were part of that ill-fated mission. The result was a complete and utter failure, leaving a field of fallen warriors. The wind tiger was far more powerful than anyone could have possibly imagined. Many died in the battle, and the few who survived were left with crippling injuries. He reveals that he was one of them, barely escaping with his life. Agate admits that without Ricard's healing magic, he would have been killed. She was the only thing that stood between him and certain death. Even now, Ricard struggles to cast pain-numbing spells just to keep them going. Runa watches his arm regenerate, scolding him for fighting while still hurt. Some people just have no patience for recovery. Kushina listens quietly, the pieces of their desperate plan falling into place. Agate dismisses his injuries, saying it's a waste to use magic on him. He struggles to his feet, insisting that he can still move and fight. Ricard reveals the town's healers can't treat the injured without more magical materials. The crystal on her weapon is a constant reminder of their dwindling resources. Kushina realizes they knew about his power and brought him here for a reason. Agate's determined gaze confirms their desperate gamble. He explains that as a survivor, he believes this is his sacred duty. The weight of his fallen comrades hangs heavy in the air. And it all comes down to this precious sap, the key to healing the town. Kushina clenches his fist, a silent resolve hardening within him. With the sun rising, Agate orders a full retreat, the team barely escaping the tree's wrath. They finally make it back to the safety of the town walls, the long night behind them. Runa is completely drained, but Agate proudly holds their hard-won prize. She points out that Kushina, who did most of the fighting, looks perfectly fine. He admits his body no longer gets tired, a side effect of his skill he seems to envy. Agate apologizes for dragging them into his mess, but he's grateful for their help. But Ricard looks at the single pot of sap, knowing it's not nearly enough. Runa realizes that with more people getting sick, they'll have to go back out there. Agate confirms her fears, but Runa seems to be thinking of a different solution. Runa has a solution, and it's a bold one. Give her all the sap. Ricard is horrified, shouting that it's impossible to give away their only hope. She explains the sap is for the many injured who can't be treated otherwise. But Runa simply dismisses their current plan as completely inadequate. She stands before them, ready to take control of this desperate situation. She tells them to invest their limited resources in her for a much greater return.